walk with open arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be.
Czechs, Slavs, Turks. 1, 2. Oh, we're live. Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought we were checking the mic over there. Welcome to the Bassline, everyone. It is a beautiful Friday afternoon in New York City, and we have another fascinating and incredible program lined up. Dr. Leonard Horowitz is a fascinating individual. He's an oral surgeon. He's a holistic health practitioner. He is an author who most recently authored Covid Coup, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. He's an old-school anti-vaxxer who's been calling out corruption in the medical establishment for quite some time, in particular the vaccine scam. He is also an expert in a subject I find truly fascinating and have wanted to know more about for years, which is the power of frequencies. We have a wide range of things to discuss, and I want to jump right into it. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the PRN airwaves, Dr. Leonard Horowitz. Welcome to the Bassline, Dr. Horowitz. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. How are you?
Excellent, Jeremiah. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Wow, it's hard to prepare for this show in particular because as I started looking into your work, I said, whoa, this is expansive. I mean, I'll warn the listeners right away, it's another one of those programs where we won't possibly be able to discuss everything we want to discuss in an hour. When I look at the research that Dr. Horowitz is doing, it would almost be better if we set this up in some sort of like ongoing seminar format or something. But I want to jump right into it, Dr. Horowitz. You're a very unique man, clearly, very experienced man. You're an oral surgeon by trade, but your study into wellness, into the nature of things goes well beyond your training as an oral surgeon, I think it's very fair to say. And I'd actually like to start with the topic, and if you could provide us with an overview of your book, Covid Coup, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. I'm very interested in your summary, if you will, of what you discuss in that book and some of the key points that we will be able to hopefully connect with our own experiences over the past 4 years, because everyone knows who listens to this show on a regular basis, this is a medical freedom dedicated program. I think that the medical freedom issue is really central to the question of human dignity and human freedom. And if we let the bad precedents that have been set over the past few years get taken any further, we will be living in a very unpleasant world, I shall say. So, Dr. Horowitz, tell us about your book, please, The Covid Coup, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. What's the premise of the book? What are some of the things that you go over in that text?
Well, the book, Covid Coup, Rise of the Fourth Reich, goes into great detail, particularly with Fauci's inner circle. And I've known Dr. Fauci for about a quarter century. I know Dr. Fauci virtually personally because one of his best friends and allies at the National Cancer Institute, National Institutes of Health, I challenged at the 11th International Conference on AIDS in Vancouver in 2006. And I had determined that HIV/AIDS had been a laboratory creation, and I actually, by the grace of God, discovered the U.S. government contracts under which numerous AIDS-like and Ebola-like viruses were bioengineered by Dr. Gallo, Robert Gallo, Fauci's good friend, by his group at Lytton Bionetics, which was the military's sixth top biological weapons contracting lab working under the National Cancer Institute supposed agenda that they were developing vaccines to cure cancer, but they needed the cancer viruses and the cancers before they could develop the vaccines. So I actually got a hold of the most incriminating documents that had been heavily suppressed. The United States General Accounting Office actually interviewed me when the Congressman Traficant had brought this matter to the attention of the General Accounting Office and the government. So that's the old history. So I virtually predicted COVID and SARS and the most advanced Ebola strains a quarter century ago. the book Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola is one of 3 national bestsellers that I have, and I have about 25, 26 books. I can't even keep track of the numbers anymore. Most of them are on Amazon Kindle. And that what I warned the world about was that if this continued laboratory covert operation of mutating viruses using first initially crude genetic engineering methods that they were using in the late 60s and early 70s, and that's what in 1974 through 76 gave rise to the first gay GRID cases, the gay-related AIDS immunodeficiency dysfunction, today called AIDS, back in the Village of New York. Back between 1972 and 74 was when they injected the gay men in New York City with the HIV/AIDS tainted hepatitis B vaccines. Gay men were volunteering, and it was being advertised. Merck Pharmaceutical Company was engaged. Centers for Disease Control were engaged. You had the New York University Medical Center engaged, and you had, besides the gay men in New York City, you had Willowbrook State School mentally retarded children on Staten Island who were being injected. So Geraldo Rivera, when he came out with this issue of abuse of the children on Staten Island, it was a superficial coverage. The real abuse was in the injection of HIV/AIDS, and then when they closed the school in 76, they sent the children back into the communities with HIV/AIDS immune dysfunction. So that's my early background, my early history. I challenged Gallo, I challenged the status quo in the scientific symposiums, and warned the world to no avail virtually, as you can now tell, and that back in 2019 now, as COVID was emerging, the first indications of it began in October, actually, whereby the main movers and shakers, what we might best call the deep state and the multinational corporation globalist banksters that are financing germ warfare, financing nuclear warfare, financing virtually all wars in the world today. It's always been that way. Military operations are economically beneficial. So the world economies have been primarily based on military expenses and wars, and bioweapons plays a major role. If we go back in history, as a prelude to what we're talking about with COVID, it was actually Henry Kissinger, who just passed away recently, who ordered the development of HIV/AIDS-like viruses. Back in 1969, it was financed by the United States government. Congress passed the Appropriations Bill of 1970 that literally gave $10 million to Lytton Bionetics for the development of these types of viruses, the immune suppressive viruses. Now, why is this important with COVID? Because the main suppressed intelligence with COVID that Fauci's circle was just horribly frightened would be revealed to the world. And the entire cover-up that Fauci administered with a number, not only Francis Collins at the National Institutes of Health, but also his counterparts at the Wellcome Trust in England, the main movers and shakers in the world of pharmaceuticals and vaccinology. Those people were panicked. On January 31st, 2020, January 31st, 2020,
yeah.
And I was actually already being concerned several months earlier. In fact, I was concerned in October, where the powers that be held a major conference in New York associated with Johns Hopkins and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to evaluate what's going to happen, every aspect to the world, to the global economy, with the emergence of COVID.
We're talking about Event 201 here?
Yes, that's right. Exactly right. So it was the 201 conference, and I became aware of that, and I said, oh, my God, it's predictive programming. Yeah. They're actually planning everything. And so actually I was the first researcher internationally to alert Drogenheimer, which was the science director for the Trump administration in the White House. Drogenheimer was concerned. There were rumors already that this was a lab-engineered virus, and I had all the evidence to prove that it was. And furthermore, I had already, as the editor of Medical Veritas, a journal, which is medicalveritas.org. It's online.
Write that down, folks. Write that down, please. Medicalveritas.org. That's key.
Yeah, medicalveritas.org has outstanding articles that have been heavily suppressed, terribly suppressed. Everything that I do is censored. I got censored again.
I'm censored too.
Yeah,
and I haven't written as voluminously as you have, but they're censoring me too. It's noticeable. So to overcome the censorship, guys, we really have to just move things manually, just hand to hand, just person to person. Don't expect these systems to work in our favor. Like my analogy is, it's pretty much like we have to walk across the country. You're walking from New York to California, so get walking, because we can't use a car. They won't let us use a car, and they won't let us use a plane. So we have to do it the old-fashioned way.
That's right. And they've infiltrated every avenue. For example, all the trolls on the internet. We've done some substantial research and exposures of the trolling operation.
Oh, if you guys aren't on Twitter, you have no idea how aggressive it is. They're coming out in full force. They're like little ninjas, just crawling on the ceilings at this point.
Right, exactly. And so that's part of the censorship suppression and globalization efforts. Where this is all going, we'll talk about. It deals with transhumanization, the post-human civilization.
Which you've written about as well.
Yeah, that's my new book that's just coming out in a couple weeks. It's called Spiritual Warfare and Survival in the Age of Chaos.
Wow.
Subtitle Artificial Intelligence, Robotics, and the Transhumanist Agenda that literally places us at the risk of extinction as a species.
Yeah.
So this is probably the most, I'd say, controversial show that you've ever had. But also
we're pretty controversial over here.
but yeah,
it's up there. It's up there. You're right there at the line.
but again, it's not to take anything away from it. The fact of the matter is you've got censorship, so nobody's out putting the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And there are very few of us that are doing that.
Yeah.
And so you're basically, you're justifying, reconciling what's going on.
Yeah.
And the greatest risk, and again, I'm leaping now. I'm leaping, let's say, a couple hours of interview and the listeners reading to catch up with the science that deals with vaccine contaminants, vaccine injection of the, here it is slowly so you get it, the nano, neuro, bioelectronic devices that are injected via the vaccines in the vaccine hydrogel component of the, quote, novel, end quote, Pfizer and Moderna vaccines.
Right.
That's what Fauci and his inner circle are desperate to keep censored. And so I was the first researcher internationally to contact Drogenheimer and the Trump administration to warn them of what they're actually dealing with. And unfortunately, Trump, whether you like him or not, in my opinion, he was grossly negligent, or his administration was grossly negligent in not attending and still insisting that the vaccines were good.
By far.
And that they were, benefiting everybody.
Well, isn't that an incredible contradiction about what's transpired, which is if you rejected the Trump vaccine, you were called a Trump supporter. And Trump supporters continue to support Trump, and while some, I should say, took the vaccine, but many didn't. And they're asking him to denounce the vaccine, and he won't. He continues to refer to himself as the father of the vaccine. So it's just an incredible just crisscross of contradictions. I actually wrote an article called, "If You Took the Trump Vaccine, You're a Trump Supporter. I hate to be the one to break it to you." And the premise is that taking a medical intervention is a much greater commitment than just casting a frivolous vote. I mean, we all just vote, and it's like flipping a coin. Maybe the person you wins or you voted for wins, maybe they lose, and you move on. But you don't move on from a permanent intervention into your body, an irreversible decision. So I am amazed to no end that people still correlate not accepting the vaccine with being a Trump supporter, when the vaccine, the rushed to market quote unquote vaccine, or as we say, products that were falsely marketed as vaccines, is the hallmark of the Trump administration. They're the hallmark of his one-term administration was Operation Warp Speed. So I will never understand how you're automatically a Trump supporter for rejecting what is his hallmark.
And what it comes to my mind that, like you're saying, this is most disturbing, disgusting, ironic, but it's also indicative of the power of the media and what's called cognitive warfare. Population control is primarily administered via media persuasion and social engineering through media messaging. And so Trump, who's a political player, even though he's a businessman, he's a political player too, and he surrounded himself with swamp beasts.
Yeah.
And he's engaged with Fauci. I mean, are you kidding me? He's got the mover and shaker of global genocide by his side.
Yeah.
And who had actually, now again, this is part of history, back in 2017, Fauci gives a presentation at Georgetown University and says that...
We've referenced this on this program last week. In fact, we referenced this.
Yeah, exactly.
And the words were, "And there will be a surprise outbreak." And he said it with this chilling tone. That's what what I pointed to, and I'll repeat this. I said this last week, but just to say to you, Dr. Horowitz, I point to the phraseology in that statement. He could have said, "And we always have to be on our toes and ready for a surprise outbreak that could happen at any time." That's not what he said. He said, "And there will be a surprise outbreak."
Exactly.
At which point sort of said, well, what's surprise and what are you aware of? It doesn't sound like a surprise to you. So let's back up a little bit. What was that statement there? But we don't do that. We just keep gliding along, and they keep steering us in the direction that they want to steer us in.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
Survival. People say, "Oh, you're so brave to speak out." I'm just trying to survive, honestly, and I want my children to be able to survive. Right. These are my instincts. I see a major lie being perpetrated on the public, and something is afoul. Something is amiss. That's all I can say. We're here gathering information about what's going on every week with outstanding guests such as yourself. So I would like to, Dr. Horowitz, actually, if you want to complete some thoughts about this, by all means, but I would like to come back around when you get a chance to the broader discussion of vaccines, because I myself have not been a quote-unquote anti-vaxxer. My children, perhaps unfortunately, have received some basic vaccines. My wife and I had the concept that, well, okay, they'll receive the tried and true vaccines, but none of the optional vaccines. We don't want them to be vaccinated from A to Z with every injection, but okay, we'll accept this one and that one. But after this ordeal, trust has been broken, and I'm hearing information about vaccines that are concerning me. I'm hearing all kinds of things from, turns out, wow, there's not just one or two doctors who are saying this stuff is dangerous, this stuff is fraudulent in terms of their claims. And, first of all, hats off to the old school anti-vaxxers. I think I've said that on this show before, but I will say it again, and I'm going to write an article about it soon. Hats off to you. You know why? Because you're the people who asserted your right to true autonomy. The government should not be telling you what medications to take. No one should. If a medication is so great, well, you take it. But you shouldn't be able to mandate it for another person. So hats off to the old school anti-vaxxers. But if you could get a chance, tell us what we should know about vaccines. Because I spoke to you initially and you said, oh yeah, I'll tell you all about that scam. So I'm very curious about your overview of that.
Well, sure, be happy to. My finished thought with regard to Fauci and your first question is on January 31st, 2020, I received, as the editor of Medical Veritas, I received Prashant Pradhan et al., what Fauci called the, quote, Indian study, end quote, that panicked them because the Pfizer-Moderna spike protein antigen that they were injecting was shown by the most advanced Watson computer in the world, the most advanced computer, to be approximately 60% from HIV/AIDS.
Wow.
The attachment mechanism by which the AIDS virus I guess that's why I gave you the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to this late 60s, early 70s, where they mutated and hybridized the leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, never before seen cancer complex virus we call HIV today. That's 60% of COVID. The attachment apparatus, that is, 60%. Now, when you are injected with the COVID vaccines, what is it supposedly doing? They claim that they're injecting you with this spike protein antigen that then they utilize the HIV/AIDS mechanism that they perfected and studied and identified back in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. They identified how reverse transcriptase works within the cells. That's an enzyme that virtually calls for life to operate in reverse. Because normally you go from a mRNA to the DNA. But in this case now, you're going from backwards, and basically you're programming the DNA through the RNA to produce more spike protein antigens that is, again, 60% HIV/AIDS. So they have censored the fact that when they injected everyone with mandated and other vaccinations for COVID, they were mostly injecting people with the antigen that is mostly associated, not even with SARS, with HIV.
Wow.
And so that's one major censored truth. And, of course, Fauci's group panicked because it was a scientific study that came out for a short period of time, and then that was censored.
Yeah.
Prashant Pradhan was most esteemed. In fact, he's the director of Watson computerization and genetic analysis for all of the Asian nations. The Pacific Rim, he controls that, and he's an Indian, and he had worked with 8 other scholars, and their work was perfect, really, really in-depth. And I was one of the beneficiaries of their research. I received their research paper. And so that's when I contacted Drugheimer, and that's when I alerted the Trump administration to no avail. Now, going to your next question is this unusual for vaccines to be risky? And the answer is absolutely not. The answer is that we're dealing with, as I mentioned previously, cognitive warfare.
Right.
Everything that you think you know that's beneficial about vaccinations is hogwash. It is a complete fraud, a manipulation of the population for genocidal profit-making and power and control over populations. That, in a nutshell, is what it's about. Now, to evidence that, all you have to do is consider the concept, even starting with antibiotics, antibiosis, anti-life. This is a poison. And so now the concept of injecting oneself with foreign RNA foreign DNA from bacteria, viruses, fungus, yeast, chicken embryo, bovine fetal serum, monkey kidney tissues with smallpox. It's cow pus. The concept that when you do that, you're benefiting your body is insane. And then when you have the results of that being censored and suppressed by cognitive warfare and media mass persuasion, including all of today's cancers virtually, I would have to say I claim that, and I would argue that probably at least 90% of the cancers in the world today are caused directly from vaccination injections of foreign genetic material. I would then say that probably about 98% of all of the autoimmune diseases that we're witnessing are being advertised for the drugs on mainstream television every evening now. All of those diseases like plaque psoriasis, the short list of autoimmune diseases include Guillain-Barré syndrome that my mother died from after receiving the swine flu vaccine, Stephen Johnson syndrome, Bell's palsy, arthritic, chronic rheumatoid arthritic conditions. You see, when you inject the human body with foreign proteins from these animal sources, what you're doing is you're putting into the body antigens. And those little protein antigens, those foreign bodies, land on your own body parts. And then that attachment in the world of immunology is called a antigenic complex. That is, piece of your own and piece of a foreign is an antigenic complex that your white blood cell bodyguards come along, they survey it, they go, whoa, this doesn't look good, and they gobble it up. The big macrophages, that's called the big eaters, they gobble it up, and then they digest it, they break it apart, and then they memorize the sequences of the proteins. And then they send out an alert to the rest of your white blood cell bodyguards that says, if you ever see this in this body, attack and destroy. Now you have just determined the pathogenic process by which virtually all of the autoimmune diseases have come about. Because what happens, let's say, in your joint with chronic crippling rheumatoid arthritis, adult and juvenile type 1 diabetes, what's happening, these protein antigens, these antigenic complexes form, let's say, in your joint, and your white blood cell bodyguard starts to inflame that joint. Now you have inflammation, redness, swelling, heat, pain, and dysfunction. Now that is now treated. How is that treated? Oh, they've censored the cause of it. They're now going to give you all these drugs that they tell you right on television is going to cause a whole variety of other side effects, including cancer and death. And these stupid people that are listening, totally ignorant, total victims of this fraud and organized crime. This is a racketeering enterprise. Big Pharma is a racketeering enterprise engaged in pan-genocide.
Is it fair to call it the medical mafia?
Yeah, Galen Langto, I think, invented that. She was one of the early heroines that you're talking about. The early people, I'm one of them. She's a good friend of mine. And there were half a dozen others that I say, my hat is off to. They were heroes and heroines who were early, came out and said, medical mafia, this is a genocidal operation that's ongoing here. So anyway, that's why I say you can't trust any vaccines for anything. And then to move forward, to go beyond this shattered medical paradigm where you've got to inject yourself with antibiotics and or vaccination toxins in order to achieve what God gave you naturally, which is health. Now you go beyond that. And that's where you wanted to go later on in this interview, into this whole realm of frequency therapeutics, into 528 frequency particularly,
yes,
because that has been found already. It's heavily censored. But when you start to study the science of even how your smart watches are operating, it's all frequency dynamics. They're diagnosing your blood sugar levels with patches now through your skin. How do they do that? How is that happening? Through frequency. And 528 frequency particularly is one of the main frequencies that they're using. And I could tell you I've written a book called The Book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love, because it is, in my opinion, I've concluded that it's the heart of nature. It's the heart of chlorophyll that gives us oxygen, that we breathe this 528 frequency in the air that we're breathing. The Holy Spirit in the religious world that comes and does all the healing, that enlivens you and refreshes you in the morning after a hard day's work. You go to sleep exhausted, you wake up in the morning refreshed. How did that happen? In the religious world, they say it's the Holy Spirit of love. And I'm saying if it's true for the heart of the rainbow, which is 528, nanometers, if it's true for the heart of sunshine, it's true for your heart, my heart, and the Creator's heart. And that's the whole thesis of now shattering the medical paradigm, where we must move as a civilization into this whole understanding that you're not simply a dumbed-down, mind control slave of the globalists who's been spiritually suppressed. Your spirit is powerful. You are, in essence, a holy child of the Creator. You're a powerful, spiritual superhuman. And that for us to regain that understanding, it takes a while to study and understand. But once you gain that understanding, now you know what Jesus was talking about. Now you know what even Moses' laws are all about. Because laws are all based on God's law, which is mathematics. It never lies. 1 and 1 is always 2. Mathematics is God's language, says the physicists, the top scholars in the world, as well as the religious scholars. God's language is math. Well, frequencies are mathematics. It's musical mathematics. In fact, you are the music. We are the music. We're being remanifested every nano instant by the grace of God and that Holy Spirit. And the best way for you to really experience that, and this concept of divine communion, where we become all that we can be by God's grace, and we're in communion with the Creator. To recreate ourselves in perfect harmony, there's again a musical term. What we have to do is just witness a musician or a vocalist who are engaged in that zone of bliss. They're engaged in that connection where inspiration, think of the word inspiration, inspire, bring that spirit in. Think of the word respiration, re-spiritualization, bringing the spirit in through the breath. Look at all the Eastern theologies and understanding prana and understanding the breath of life, and in Hebrew, the Ruach HaKodesh, which is the breath of life or the Holy Spirit, bringing that in through chlorophyll, which is outputting that color, 528, greenish yellow, the heart of the rainbow, the heart of sunshine. We breathe that in, and when it comes in, we're enlivened and uplifted and restored and healed. That's the future of medicine, which is now. And that's the remedy for what ails civilization. And that's the topic of the new book that says we're either going to go here or we're going to be doomed as a civilization to artificial intelligence and robotics. That's big tech, big pharma, big banking, and the globalists are advancing.
Amazing. So I want to get further into this discussion about frequency, and I'm a musician by trade. I've toured with a lot of different artists. I've performed in a lot of different countries. I've written a lot of songs. I've collaborated with a lot of people. I have a bunch of questions, but before we go into that further, I want to ask you another question pertaining to where we started out while we have you on our airwaves. I'm very curious about and I'm sorry to jump around, but again, I wish we had like 7 hours to just go over all of these various topics. So I'm sorry to jump around a little bit, but I want to ask you one question before we jump back to the frequency discussion, which is I want to know your take about the injury that's going on with people related now to not vaccines in general, but where we started with the COVID vaccines, because I see a lot of people announcing obituaries on social media, I think at an unusual rate. More and more people are talking in sort of technical, clinical terms about we're observing excess death. There's a paper by Denis Rancourt from Quebec, I believe, but he's written extensively recently about excess mortality, where he says the COVID vaccines could be attributed, or that 17 million deaths could be attributed to the administration of COVID vaccines as a reasonable estimate. I see people saying they have new medical problems. I mean, some of this stuff is almost like right out of a movie. Like I have a good friend who he's a bartender, and he knew the vaccine was bad news to begin with. One of the regulars came to the bar and says, "Oh yeah, I got my COVID vaccine today," so on and so forth. The next week he comes back, the guy's face is drooping off the side of his face. He's, "Oh man, I got Bell's palsy. Would you believe it?" And there's the bartender just quietly pouring the drink. And he knows why the man has Bell's palsy, but it's not his job as a bartender to say so. He's just, "Oh, that's a bummer, man. Sorry to hear that." And you're just seeing all this stuff. I mean, I've seen people denounce me for my quote-unquote anti-vax views and denouncing the COVID vaccine, and then those same people are saying, "My friend died today. I can't believe it. How could you be gone? You're gone too soon." It's like, are you going to put two and two together over here? I mean, it's so macabre. It's so awful. But I'm wondering, it's like Ryan Cole, he made an interesting comment. He said something to the effect of these vaccines are like the Swiss Army knife of death. There's 1,291 side effects associated with these vaccines, I think, according to Pfizer internal documents. So how does this work? How do you have a thing in people's bodies that's just causing acute organ failure? I saw a paper called COVID vaccines linked with ocular degeneration associated with kidney problems, of course, the myocarditis. People are connecting this with turbo cancers. How is it that there's this wide range of symptomology on the other hand, and other people who are walking down the street and saying, "Well, I feel fine as of now"? And I always point out to people, don't say that someone is fine because they didn't drop dead in front of you, right? You can't say, "Oh, well, this person, that person, the other person are fine." Well, did you conduct medical examinations on those people? So because someone looks fine, of course, that doesn't mean that they're fine. But how is it that you have so many athletes just dropping dead on the field of play, or at least having a heart attack, if not dying? We witnessed the first ever football game ended by a cardiac arrest right there on Monday Night Football in the first quarter. Thankfully, the player didn't die. But what's going on with people's health, and what can we expect over the next few years? And what's going on here? How are some people not experiencing any symptoms, and other people, their lives are ruined within 24 hours of taking the shot, if not ended?
Well, it's complex, but very simply, you have some vaccines and vaccine lots that are more tainted than others.
Right.
And it wouldn't surprise me, given the nefarious operations of Big Pharma, that they would be giving you, let's say, non-toxic injections versus some toxic injections, just so that they can make the argument that, you're witnessing. But having said that, you mentioned the issue of Bell's palsy. The guy's face starts all of a sudden drooping. That's exactly the pathogenic process that I shared earlier. Bell's palsy is one of about 100 new, never-before-seen autoimmune diseases that only came about in the vaccination era, along with the cancers, whereby, for example, you get the injection of the protein antigens. Let's say the COVID vaccine, the spike protein antigen I mentioned. Okay, it's mostly HIV/AIDS, and it's got protein components. And there's also something I was going to mention that's very important in a couple of minutes. People should take out pencil and paper and maybe write it down. The fact is that the nerves feeding the face are susceptible to the intoxication by the protein antigen. If the antigens, these foreign bodies, and the antigenic complex forms on the side of the nerve fibers feeding the face, and you have beginning inflammation, inflammatory reaction on those nerves, you get Bell's palsy. That's one of the autoimmune diseases. So it's all the same pathogenic process. Now think about this. What I'm saying is outrageously simple. It's outrageously proven by science. It is the basis of immunology. Yet, why do doctors say, we don't know what causes this? Oh, it must be in your genes. Because you have cognitive warfare. These are mind control slaves of big pharma. That's why I don't go to see doctors. I try never to go see a medical doctor. I try never to go to hospitals, which I consider modern concentration camps. I base that statement on the fact that if you follow the early evolution of American healthcare and the American Public Health Association, you not only have the Rockefeller cartel, heavy in New York, but you have their partners in Germany. You have what's called IG Farben organization, Germany's leading industrial organization that for all practical purposes was the Third Reich. Their top officials were the top SS. They were full-fledged married partners, said a New York judge, in regarding the partnership between the Rockefeller cartel and IG Farben cartel, of which Bayer Corporation and the director, Hermann Schmitz, was the director. Now, from that cartel, when they decartelized it, supposedly, they broke it up into today's leading pharmaceutical companies. So that's the history. Now we've got virtually Nazi Germany operating on the streets of every major metropolitan area and every even small town that has been now subjected to these vaccinations, claiming mandatory vaccinations. That's unbelievable, but yet it's happened. It's happened. And the only way we can reconcile it is with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That includes what it is that I've been saying. So that explains your Bell's palsy case. I would now encourage people to take the next step, and it's a very, very, very disgusting and horrible step. But it must, if you want to save yourself, you want to save your children, you want to save civilization, you must take this next step, is to realize that where the entire vaccine industry is going is into neuro bioelectronic technologies. What nano is tiny micro devices, virtual self-assembling nanobots.
Right.
That's a weird term. Okay, but self-assembling nano devices that are injected via the vaccine hydrogels that are fueled by what I think is probably your greatest risk and best explanation for all of this massive hemorrhaging of cardiac vascular blood vessels and people dying and dropping and other people getting various other illnesses. In my opinion, based on what I've been reading in the scientific literature, the main issue is graphene, which turns to graphene oxide, which is a man-made energy transmitter. Your body is warm. The heat in your body is energy. To produce what is called the Neuralink, that is the brain-cloud connection that Elon Musk has been saying, we need a moratorium on this industry because it represents civilization's greatest risk of extinction. That's Elon Musk.
Well,
he tells you he's been investing in competing devices and electronics, bioelectronics. This is bioelectronics. Your biology is an electrical system. In essence, your DNA, I say, is an antenna to God, because the 96% function, censored, suppressed function of your DNA is to receive and transmit sound and light signals. Now you've got your interface to that Holy Spirit I talked about. Spirit energy, energy being negatively charged electrons that are vibrating at certain frequencies. And now your DNA receives and transmits, and all of your cells are coordinated by sound and light signaling, virtually by the grace of God and the administration of this power. So your body contains this power, and it's powered by water in your body. About 80% of your body I call liquid God, because what I'm saying is water is a liquid crystal, superconductor of sound and light. So, at any rate, that's the fundamentals to understand. Once you now understand that, and you then understand that graphene saps that energy. It harvests your body heat, your water. That's why they call it the hydrogel. The graphene is in the hydrogel component of the vaccination. And now what they've done is they've injected you with a bioelectronic device that has the capacity to wirelessly connect your brain to the cloud. That seems like science fiction. It seems like woo-woo, conspiracy theory weirdo-ness.
Yeah.
That's what the most advanced science has been showing since about 2015.
Yeah.
The military has been investing in this.
And one thing you have to understand as well, and I point this out to people, is that for the powerful, there's no such thing as too much power. So one of the corniest things that people will say, well, why would you want to inject an operating system into people? They already have your cell phone. They know what you're doing. Yeah, but I can unplug the battery in my cell phone. I could toss my cell phone in the river. It's sort of like a billionaire. You think $1 billion is enough, but that's not enough. They want 2 billion. They want 10 billion. They want to be the richest person in the world. So no, too much is never enough for these folks. If you're wondering, well, why would you want so much power? Bless your heart that you're not a corrupt person who wants to control everybody. But for the people who are operating in this ruthless manner, well, yeah, they have a lot of power over you now, but in their opinion, it's not enough. It's sort of like the depopulation discussion, and I'm not saying there's this big depopulation thing going on. I'm a journalist, quote unquote. I'm bringing in other people to discuss this. I'm not asserting my own opinions, but people will say, well, why would they want to kill people? I don't know. Why did every mass murderer in history want to kill people? Because they think there's too many people on the planet. That's why. Well, I mean, what additional explanation do you need? It's like, why do people do the terrible things that they do? I don't know. It's very sad, but they do terrible things.
Yeah, I could give you a whole discussion about absolute power corrupting absolutely and going into the spiritual components of that. In fact, I do that in the new book that's coming out in January.
Well, I encourage people to buy that book, and like I said, I'm dreading the fact that we don't have all day to talk. So I am running out of time here, and I want to ask you a few questions about this frequency science that you're so heavily involved in and so aware of. Now, let me ask you, because I'm a musician, as I've stated, I'm very dedicated to music. Music has taken me further, really, than anything else in life. It's allowed me to travel and meet so many wonderful people and so on and so forth. It's my number one passion. But how can I start the process of converting to 528? If I've been doing the 440 thing, I've been doing the Western concert, 440 hertz equals the note A. How do I make the change? How do I begin the process of being on the 528 frequency myself and even putting an ensemble together in that manner?
Well, give you a resource real quick, 528revolution.com, 528revolution.com, has a variety of articles that begin to deal with this, but I will share that in a second. Let me just complete my initial thought, which
please.
does involve this 528. You know, you've got your graphene, you need an antidote. If you've been injected with the vaccinations and you want a way out, you go to healthyworldstore.com and order Zeolove, Zeolove, that contains humic acid, humic acid, fulvic acid, as well as zeolite, which is a blood purifier. And humic acid and humus has been shown and proven by the Chinese Communist Party to be the antidote to graphene and graphene poisoning of human beings as well as the environment. So we were well ahead of the curve when we came out years ago with Zeolove that contained humus and humic acid and the minerals in there. Now, what's special about this is that it vibrates and resonates with 528 frequency in what's called structured water, because it's a liquid product. Zeolove is a liquid product. You take, let's say, 3 capfuls a day. If you're really concerned to purge these toxins out of the body, take 3 capfuls a day, maybe 3 times a day, and take it with prayer, because that's what 528 does. So before I tell you how to tune to 528, let me tell you the power in 528. When you pray, and science has already proven, it was actually on Headline News a couple nights ago, another study came out that said, yeah, prayer works. If you ask, how does prayer work, and you realize you are the music, your heart, in heartfelt, loving intention, in faithful prayer. Faith cements the relationship between you and the Creator. So that's what's necessary to have a relationship. You have to have faith in the relationship. If you lose faith in your spouse or business partner, the relationship is over. It's degenerative and destructive. You must have good faith. Now, your heart, in heartfelt loving prayer, in faithful loving intention, outputs a frequency of 528. So when your heart now, which is the greenish yellow 528 nanometer chakra of your body, that's your energy vortex, is pumping out love for healing, now it's in coherence with the vibration of Zeolove or oxysilver.com, which is our electroceutical alternative to vaccinations and antibiotics. Again, you can get it on healthyworldstore.com. healthyworldstore.com. So, in essence, we've developed products that are remedies for this insanity and the toxicity. Now, to your question, if you're a musician, most people out there are playing, who are musicians are engaged with guitars these days, and there is what's called a chromatic tuner. A Korg chromatic tuner. And that comes defaulted at A440 because the Rockefellers, after 10 years of acoustic weaponry back in the 1930s, established for the entire Western world the spiritually suppressive standard tuning that literally suppresses Love 528. It suppresses the spirit of human beings and induces distress and illness in us. That's what they make money on. That's what they've been doing.
Can I ask you, Dr. Horowitz, is there anything redeeming about all the music that we love that was recorded in the wrong frequency? Like, it means so much to us, and like, are you telling us now, oh, that was just suppressing the human race?
Yes. I love music like you do, and I'm forced to listen to sometimes music tuned into A440, and I resent it. That's why I have published and are broadcasting 528radio.com. On 528radio.com, you can listen to some of my favorites. It's my personal radio station. And I play my guitar with the music on there because it's been transposed into 528.
Well, we have a lot more to talk about, Dr. Horowitz. We're running out of time, unfortunately.
Okay, let me just real quick then.
Please.
You take your A440 standard tuning, you tune up 4 cycles per second. You need a tune-up. You go from A440 to A444. That gives you C, that's your base of your scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C is the scale. C528. Now you're in tune with John Lennon's white piano when he produced Imagine. Now you're in tune with Led Zeppelin when they produced Stairway to Heaven. Somehow they knew. Jay-Z did the album in 2017 called 444. That was based on my work. Contrary to his story, it was based on my work. His engineer, No ID, used my work. The entire album is in C528, A444.
Wow.
The next
That's an
year,
evil person using divinity to make his profit.
The next year, Beyonce, 2008, her album, get this, it was called Everything is Love album, all produced in 528 based on my work.
Whoa.
So this is where you're seeing some of the top recording artists, even the ones that you can't trust, who have really been manipulated and dumbed down and evil themselves. Yeah. And that's where we've come now. When you say that absolute power corrupts absolutely, you're talking about pure evil, and this is the administration of pure evil to suppress our spirits musically, mathematically.
Amazing. Well, we're out of time, Dr. Horowitz. I thank you so much. You are so knowledgeable, and everything that you're saying is just truly fascinating. I would love to see if we could, continue our conversation and see if I could help put a 528 orchestra together, because that's what I do, is I bring musicians together. I've been doing it for years. My band, Earth Driver, is like a big mothership style band, different singers, horn players, guitar players, percussionists, keyboardists, players of every instrument. And I would love to get a big gang of musicians together to explore this 528 frequency. So maybe we could coordinate.
Hey, Jeremiah, God bless you.
You too.
You do that, I'll finance it, and I'll book you.
That's amazing. We're going to talk. But everyone, thank you for listening to The Bassline. Please follow up on the work of Dr. Leonard Horowitz. The guy is clearly a very deep guy. And please support this show by going to my website, jeremiahhosea.com. Buy a song for $1. Please check out my new Substack. Please just click like on there. We're building up the visibility of this platform. I'm bringing you great guests every week, but I need your support. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Dr. Horowitz, and have a beautiful day, everyone.